no matter where you are, no matter what sort of weather you're experiencing. Diesel and Clooney Unpack the World is the perfect podcast to keep you company. Perhaps it's cold and drizzly and raining. Snuggle up with us and a warm beverage, perhaps several warm beverages, depending on how long the episode is. Maybe it's sunny and bright and delightful outside. Bring us with you. Go have a bike ride, have a jog, put us in your ears, and take us along. Diesel and Clooney, the perfect podcast for any weather. Yay!
That's it.
How is the weather where you are, Chris?
That's a good question. So I'm in Oregon today for another. I'm in this country for another 5 hours, and in order my exit from Oregon, it's delightful. It's a clear blue sky. It rained yesterday, so everything is lovely and green. So it's a clear blue sky, relatively crisp. Jerry, what about you?
It is also a clear blue sky, same sky, I think.
Same sky,
yeah, and just a little chill in the air this morning. But going to warm up. That's weather where I live. Is it warms up, and then it stays warm for about 7 months. Hot, just crazy hot. Yeah, like 40 or 100, depending on where you're from in the world and listening. It's just hot.
You're beginning. It's
I
the
live in
summer
a
season
desert.
starting.
Yeah.
You're on summer's eve. You're on summer's eve. It's like the little tiny.
Yeah, and it's great. This is
it's
the perfect time of year. Like, it's just lovely. It's a little cool in the morning, so cuddle up and under the blankets and get up and get around, and then it warms up in the air. It's just absolutely perfect. And then it gets hot, like scorchingly hot. And I'm okay with that, because I know it's cliche. It's a dry heat. That's really a thing, though. Like, that is actually a thing, because I'm going to use Fahrenheit because this is my Americanness coming out. But 80 and humid is much worse than 105 and dry heat. The sweatiness, can't do that. But I don't mind hot as long as I don't sweat like you, Chris.
I am a profuse sweater. Profuse, Jerry. Well, and we're on the same coast for the next 5 hours. I'll be on the next same 5 hours. Coast. Yeah. Next 5 hours, I'm on the same coast as you. But Jerry, speaking of coasts,
tell me something else.
Do you know who's at least a few coasts away from us? That would be our guest.
Who is? We have a guest.
We have a guest.
Oh,
or
this is great.
Either that, or we're just inviting random people. Yeah, we're just inviting random people to sit in on our podcast now, just for our own amusement. No, we have. I'm very excited about this guest. Several coasts away.
Is it a good guest?
Oh, it's a fantastic guest. We have with us the one, the only, also appropriate in all weathers, Rachel Cason, who has written a phenomenal book. I had the privilege of I got to read the book before it even came out, which was very, very exciting.
I'm so excited right now. I can't stand it.
Yeah, it's Rachel's phenomenal. We'll go into the book, but first, I mean, before we even get into anything else, Rachel, the big question on everyone's mind: what's the weather like where you are?
It is warm, which means we are in the perfect state actually here in England. But this is the time of year where we all appreciate the sun. We've had it for a few days in a row, which is madness.
Ooh, nice.
But now we all start complaining, because this will be the only sun we have. We're real pessimists.
Yeah.
Summer's not started yet, and we've decided it's over. But this is it. Enjoy it while it's here, because it will be gone soon.
Any plans? Any plans to get out in the sun, or do you just watch it?
I sit in my office talking to people who are sitting in the sun in their places. So I get it through this window, but I have to close the curtains so that it doesn't blind my camera. So I'm slightly resentful, actually.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Is resenting the podcast hosts.
This is entirely.
This is going to be good.
It is.
I have enjoyed a bit of it. There's a tent in my garden at the minute because I wanted the illusion of going somewhere in the sun. So I have to take that down at some point. But yeah, that was fun for a while.
I do like that you the illusion. Like you put a tent up, you're like, I
Yeah,
may not actually spend time there, but it's there.
Yeah.
it's there. It's an
Should I choose
option.
to? Yeah, it's an I
Right.
can look at it and go, that'd be nice to be in that. Nah.
No.
I I do that all the
Exactly.
time.
Nah,
That's kind of
I'll do
like
this
it's the
podcast
weather
instead.
equivalent. It's the weather equivalent, I think, of what people do with bowls of fruit. You know, I it's it
Yeah.
cliche as dry heat, but the fact that you get a bowl of fruit and set it out on the table and you're like, oh yeah, put the fruit that way I'll eat healthy snacks. And you walk by and you look at that apple and you're like, nope, we'll have a Snickers. And the
Yeah.
fruit just sits there. The fruit just sits
Absolutely.
there. But it's this object you can look at and be like, "Huh, I'll eat healthy. And you can look at your tent and be like,
I
I'll
feel
enjoy
better
this.
about myself just because it's there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely.
I
Well,
get
it's an
it.
identity invitation. It's this
Ooh.
is the kind of person I could be if I wanted to. I could be a camper.
There's
I could do that. It's right
Oh,
there.
I feel another
It's
book.
not
I feel another book
yeah.
coming.
the same
That's
with the
good
fruit. I
stuff.
could be healthy. I could be
Yeah.
somebody who
Oh.
wants apples.
Do you hear that, Jerry? She just put clever terms
On
on the
our
gibberish that I
gibberish. Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
She
That's
just clever
You're
termed my
this
gibberish.
is why we
inspired.
have guests. Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Well, I do. This is the perfect opportunity, I think, to talk a little bit about your book, which the title, by the way, of Rachel's book, I think, is fantastic. It's Incredible Lives and the Courage to Live Them. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did.
And
It's
then
long. It's a long
oh, it
time.
is, but it's
It's a
so good.
great
Listen,
title. Yeah.
as someone who's incredibly verbose, like it's very hard for me to whenever I submit proposals, like for conferences or things, that is one of the comments I get back is they're like, your title, your title is a presentation in and of itself. Like we have to listen to a presentation before we hear your presentation. I was like, I don't see what the problem is. So
Yeah.
no, I get it.
Oh, I'm
Well,
glad I'm
I'm
not the only
convinced that
one.
80% of book sales are book title sales.
Yeah, book
I mean,
title
that's
sales.
you look at the title, the 40 or the 4-hour work week, right? Like
Mm,
bestseller, New York Times bestseller. I think I think it's sold on the title alone. At
Mm.
least 80% of that. It's a good book, but it's like 600 pages. I'm like,
yeah,
really, you can work a week in 4 hours, but you can't write the book in fewer pages.
this is false
But people
advertising.
still bought it. And so,
Yeah.
Rachel, I think your title is fabulous. Draws people in, makes people want it. Now I'm excited to hear about the content.
Well,
Yeah.
ironically, it's quite a short book, I think, with very short chapters. Given the
Even
title,
better, even
it's
better.
like
But yeah,
it's
that's a skill.
misleading somewhat,
That's
actually.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a collection of thoughts, really, um, born out of my own experience as a third culture kid, and working as I do now with third culture kids and the adult versions thereof, and it's sort of it came about because I was blogging. I was blogging regularly
Mhm.
as part of building up life story therapies, as part of kind of curating and getting to grips with my own identity, working in that area, and as part of what I think is only fair, actually, if you're going to tell a professional about your life, they owe you. So a lot of it is me. It's kind
They
of like,
owe you.
actually, there's a safety transaction here. People need to know who I am, and we're
Yeah.
TCKs. We gauge the room. And we like to know who our audience is for our
Mm.
stories. So a lot of that is born out of my own experiences or sort of trigger moments that kind of take me back into my own story, but then
Mm.
connect up to these broader themes that are sort of universal amongst us.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, and that's the subtitle of it is because that is the subtitle of the book is was it Thoughts from a TCK Therapist?
Okay, therapist. Yeah, I had to check. I had to look at it because I
Yeah.
doubt myself, chronically.
Like, what did I write
I
again?
wrote it, but did I? Did I really? I don't know.
What did I say?
Oh, but that is, I think that was I kind of like that that was included as a subtitle, just because it it sets up, I think, the tone of the book. Yours was one of the books where again, I'm very verbose, and yours was one of the books where you were able to squish into, a chapter or sometimes even a paragraph. You would take something that I had sort of an ethereal thought or feeling or a gut intuition on, sort of an internal something or other, and you were able to externalize it, give it language, and say it succinctly. And I found myself repeatedly as I read the book going, yeah, 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 that's exactly what that is. And
Mhm.
I've never been able to put it, you, like I said, you can put in one paragraph what I would have to sit someone down for and go on for an hour and be like, and I kind of, and then and your book was
Oh,
like,
I
yeah,
appreciate that.
and that
Mm.
it's so helpful. One of the reasons I'm a big fan of your book is it holds true to a phrase that I stole from a professor I had in university who would say all the time, one of the best things you can do in life is learn to process intellectually what you do intuitively. And to me, that
Mhm.
your book does exactly that. So
Mm.
to unpack, because that's the subtitle on
The
even our
word that
podcast title is really quite long. Um,
It's
but
true. Yeah.
even even that we want to unpack things. So can you tell us a little bit about your TCK story? Give us
so I'm
your
having that
backstory.
immediate reaction a lot of us, I think, get, which is,
Yeah.
oh Lord, how much of it do they want? And
Mm.
how long have we got? And
Yeah.
which kind of that kind of thing, which is, it just amuses me because
Because
this
we
is
all
what I
still do it.
work with. Yeah, we all
Yeah.
it's like an instinctual kind of, okay,
Yeah.
let's go, let's see. And I'm going to watch for the glazed expression and I'll know when to reel back.
Like, oh, it's happening.
Yeah. So in terms of my TCK story, I was born and raised in Niger in West Africa to missionary parents, and did the back and forth. So the routine amongst mission at that time, at any rate, was sort of basically a 3-4 years in the field, abroad, and then about 6 months to a year. I think we mostly did a year back in the home country, in inverted commas,
Mhm.
passport country. And so there was a kind of back and forth rhythm around that until I was 16. And then we repatriated about 2 years ahead of the thought schedule. And then I did my A levels and gap year and university and so forth here. But I have to say, a lot of the TCK processing, like for a lot of us, that happened after the TCK bit, that
Yeah.
happened
Yeah.
after the abroad bit. So I can hear myself trail off the story as I get past the the abroad element, the interesting part. But actually all the development, the growth, the identity work really kicks in from about 16 onwards.
Is
And I'm
is
still doing it now.
so like in your that's a common story, right? Like we is that TCKs begin processing that whole
Yeah,
experience later.
yeah, yeah.
Um, is that a good thing? Is that just how it's going to be? And we all kind of unpack our childhood when we get older, right? Like
Right.
regardless of the story, but in your perspective, y- you know, is there a way to help start processing that earlier? Could you have started processing that earlier? And
Yeah.
just speak to that.
I love that. That's a great question because it's something that I encounter a lot around. I work with people in their 20s through to their, I think, sort of early 70s at the minute. And there's all sorts of degrees of processing within that
Yeah.
spectrum.
Yeah.
And one of the things that often comes up is, could I have avoided some of this
Yeah.
with support earlier? And I think a lot of the time, yes. And it's so exciting. There's so much, organizations like Kaleidoscope, for instance, they're doing so much for younger TCKs. There's always been kind of transition to college stuff. I say always, for a long time now. There's been these kinds of transition aids, and then concepts like raft that you see in the Pollock and Van
Mhm.
Raken book. There's all sorts of tools out there to help manage that transition, but I think my position is that there's a cap on how much we can do,
Yeah.
actually, just because
Yeah.
developmentally
Mhm.
we look back when we look back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And an awful lot of the processing work requires a certain element of stability and crisis to invite.
Yeah.
And it's that interesting juxtaposition between the two that makes space for, hang on, who am I and where am I and what am I again? And if we can de-shame that, we've done a huge service to TCKs to kind of go, actually, you couldn't have done this before. And maybe nobody's failed you, especially either. Actually, that this isn't something to avoid. This kind of identity crisis was always coming. And there are things we can do to equip young TCKs, but that's going to be stuff around functioning well as a family and awareness and cultural sensitivity and building positive relationships for all the cultures involved. It's not necessarily going to be about processing it. It's just setting it up for the processing it so that you've got a strong sense of worth and self and compassion and all of that stuff to hold you in the absolute collapse of self that is coming. And that's okay.
That's so well said. And that's something, you know, Chris and I have talked about this a lot because our experiences are very different. I'm the odd person out in this podcast because I didn't grow up TCK. I raised my kids as TCKs. And there was this sense, it was a years long process for me to not feel the shame and the badness of what am I doing to my kids? What am I, because though, and where I landed was that exactly what you're just saying, like that really resonates with me. Because the stability comes from the inside out, right? Like that we can be stable even though we're moving again, even though we're getting up at 4 a.m. and flying for 36 hours to go see people that we love and we call family, but we only see once every 2 years, 3 years, you know, like there's a lot of chaos in there. There's a lot of what I felt initially, because my definition of stability was different, but that was instability, and had to really come to grips with the fact that no, we're going to build stability from the inside. And the other thing, as you were talking, is just there's this sometimes like we don't even know what to process, right? Because as we're growing up, that it's not, there's no contrast, there's no chaos yet until we move to something else and we see how these other people grew up and how they experience life, and that becomes very real. And then we're starting to process this other experience that we had, but back then it was just life, right? Like it was just normal. That for you, like 3 years here, 1 year here, 3 years here, 1 year here, that's normal. What really piques my interest is the title of your book. Say it again. Incredible
I'm
Lives.
looking again. I'm checking because I don't want
Incredible,
to misquote myself.
Incredible lives and the courage to live them. Is that it?
Live them. Yes.
I remembered it, and I haven't even seen the book cover yet. That makes it a good title. But the fact that you did 3 and 1, 3 and 1, 3 and 1 your entire life, and then you repatriated and you did your education, all of that, right? That you had that experience, and you title a book Incredible Lives. Could you, what makes it incredible? What can make it incredible?
So I love the word incredible because it allows space for both the excitable, incredible, this is amazing kind of version of it, and also the really, that's
Not
unbelievable.
incredible. Yeah.
That is actually incredible.
Yeah.
And I think that tension holds an awful lot for the TCK experience of trying to tell our stories. Is, well, we often get that kind of and it might be internal or it might be externally reflected. Oh, I'm special, I'm interesting, I'm different, and that could be alienating, or it could be like, oh, I'm sparkly. And then you have that other piece of, I mean, for me at primary school, it was, well, you can't have lived in Africa, you're not Black. You know, it was that kind of, you don't make sense. You're who you are, and the story you're telling is incredible. And I wanted that word just held space for both of those experiences. And so hence the choice, really.
Which, so, and I love it, especially because I think it's a theme I talk about a lot. So, you know, I've got to sneak it in here. But I do hold to, we in the TCK world, we quoted a lot that lovely quote from Ted Ward in the 1980s, who said something to the effect of, TCKs are the prototype citizens of the future.
Mhm.
And I think, especially as I went back through and looked through your book again, I think there's a lot there that is applicable, even beyond the TCK experience. Um, I mean, and even to help TCKs, um, in when they feel they're normal, to understand the incredible of other people. I can remember
Yeah.
one of my first. I tried out. I was educated mostly in the UK, but after I graduated from high school, I graduated from a military high school in the UK. And I have a U.S. passport. I can speak with an American accent. So I was like, I should go to America. I'm sort of from there on some documents, and so I did. And it's a whole random thing because it was terribly planned. I really, really did just sort of go and landed somewhere. But I remember I was in Spokane, Washington, and I can remember I found things incredible that nobody else did. And same
Mhm.
thing, they thought things about me were incredible, and I was like, man, whatever. I can remember just being absolutely blown away at how straight the roads were. The roads in Spokane, it's a grid. It's just a great bid. Everything it's straight roads, all straight roads,
Yeah.
which is not how we do things in the UK or even a lot of Europe. We have ring roads and twisty roads, and you navigate by what's along the way. You can't just say to go from Norwich to London, you can't just say head southwest. Good luck, trying to just head in one direction. So there were
Yeah.
there were things, I was blown away by how straight the roads were, and it made me sound ridiculous because everyone was like, "Of course the roads are straight. What? Of course the roads are straight." And them showing me, historic buildings in Spokane, be like, "This factory, it's been here 80 years," and I was like, "Okay, so pretty new then." They're like, "No, 80, 80." I was like, "So just 10, just 80, not 800, just 10." Yeah. But so there were
Yeah.
there were things that they thought were incredible that I was like, "Ah," things that I thought incredible that they thought, "Ah." And to me, and I don't know, and maybe Jerry can speak to this. I almost feel like that whole, you put it so well, the whole identity crisis, that I think people inevitably have. And I would say I think there's probably an element of that everyone has to go through. I think, the difference for TCKs is they are lacking a lot of times the language and framework to process it. But, even for you, Jerry, I mean, surely, that's the fun of the differences is we both have experienced cross-cultural. We just did it in different ways. I grew up with it, so it was normal. So a lot of stuff to me is like, whatever. And you voluntarily jumped into it. But even with that, do you think just in your life, was there a point, was there an identity point where even though you grew up with all the same, influence, that you had a lot more consistency, were there still some of the identity crisis that snuck in for you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think to kind of parallel that experience, even in what we're talking about here, for me, there was my normal, which was very monocultural, very location centric, very culturally homogenous. Um, and that was my normal, and then I got glimpses of beyond that, right? So like National Geographic was awesome because it was like there's this whole world out there, and even media and movies and that kind of thing. But there was something that later, as I did the processing, I realized there was something in me that wasn't in everybody else. And it wasn't unique to me, but there are just some people who just have no fascination with that, have no desire to
Mm,
see anything beyond, and still don't, right? Like even as adults, I have lots of friends who just don't understand why I would ever. But I got itchy back then, and even we would have missionaries like your parents, Rachel, come to our church and talk to us. And that was so exciting. I remember one gave me a coin one time from the Philippines, And that was like the biggest moment of my childhood. I remember coming home from school and looking at my bag, which my mother, I guarantee, got at a, I don't know how do you all say it? A yard sale, a rummage sale, a garage sale, what's it called where you are?
Tabletop sale, I'd say.
I love that tabletop sale. Yeah,
Yeah.
Chris.
Or car boot sales. We used to go to quite a few car boot
Ooh.
sales. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you actually put it in the car boot?
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
you'd
But
put a
that's
little
just what
table
kind of what
out
it's
and
called.
you'd put a
Okay.
little table out in front of the
You
boot as
carry
well.
it in the car boot.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
a car
All right.
boot amount of
All right.
things
All right. Yeah.
Right.
put onto tabletops.
Love that.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry, that was I got distracted. I had a bag, my new school bag, and I looked on the bottom of it, and it had a little tag, and it said "Made in Taiwan," and I was so excited. Like it was such a big moment for. I ran home, look, Mom, look at this. This is and she's like, honey, everything is made in Taiwan. This was back in the 80s, and like that was I discovered later was unique to me. I didn't understand then why everybody wouldn't be fascinated by it, but there was something in there that just really wanted me to move beyond normal, right? My normal. And I think I mean, I think you can probably set that side by side with the TCK. Like normal is all of these things, and there's usually something that I don't know, for the two of you, was there something in there that saw how the other side lived and was attracted to that or drawn to that? Rachel, what about you?
Well, I wasn't so much attracted to the normal or the non-TCK way of doing life as repelled. And I think that's a taught thing, that's a learned
We
thing.
are a repelling group of people. Yes.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that comes out actually in the term monocultural, that I have a bit of an allergic reaction to personally, because it's, you know, we are many as TCKs, you are one, you poor things over here. And there's something inherent in that, you know, abundance, scarcity. Like there's just something there.
I feel bad for saying monocultural earlier. Chris, edit that out. Yeah.
Right. I got
That's
it.
a great
No problem.
point.
I'm coming over as
I need to
judgy
process
now,
that,
which is really
yeah,
great.
but yeah,
no,
you're so right.
it's just and I'm essentially argumentative as well. So any phrase that's going to be used a lot, I'm going to probably find a thing to question it. But yeah, I think from my experience, and I hear this echoed in other TCK spaces as well. We a lot of us had parents who were looking for more, who were looking for something different than normal, who were excited and curious about something else, and who often went through quite a lot to get it in some way. At least that's inherent in the narrative. And so nothing direct has to be communicated there for young TCKs to observe that, receive that, and go, well, I guess this is better than whatever it is they left. And of course, what they left was their passport context. So when going back to that, why would I decide that was something to be curious about?
Yeah.
That's the place that was left. That and then on top of that, you might get a certain discourse as well that a lot of parents will use with TCKs to kind of soften the blow of difficulties adapting and integrating into a peer context, which is they just don't understand you, you're so different, you have these wonderful wide horizons, you've seen things they can't understand, etc., which just, you know, goes along with the ignorant stereotype, really. And they don't understand you because you're special, you're different. They should be curious about you. There's nothing much there for you to be curious about.
Right.
And even if that's just very subconscious, unmet, unintended, it's felt and sets us up actually for a complete lack of curiosity in people who live local lives, or I'd use the term settled people. And I think that's a lot of the work I do now with adult TCKs is we take for granted that we're curious humans, but we can be very, very picky about what we're curious about, that moral hierarchy of what is worth curiosity and what isn't, what is inherently interesting and what's a bit plebeian. And so to kind of kindle that curiosity and nurture it and go, well, they're doing it different. They must have a reason. Let's assume that they're not just stupid. You know,
Yeah.
what are they getting from it? Let's get into that. It's exciting.
Mm.
Wow. You're blowing my brain wide open right now, because it's just like there is that concept in which first of all, were your parents, did they grow up cross-culturally, or
No,
were you first generation?
yeah, I'm first
Okay.
generation. Yeah.
Yeah. So like so they're very similar to me having that experience, growing up not monoculturally. Like I will never say that again, but growing up,
I'm
You've
cringing.
changed him.
I've
You've
tainted it
changed
now.
him,
I don't
Rachel.
I don't
You've
know what to
changed him.
say now. But growing up, how they grew up like me, and then moving into a cross-cultural setting, um, there is this sense of one, like there's these phases of one, like I mentioned earlier, kind of coming to grips with it. This feels wrong, this feels off, but that's because my experience over here was completely different, and this is a different way of doing things, and it's okay. And then there's this justification phase that we go through where and not only that, but building it up like, no, it is good. And I spent a lot of my experience doing that, right? Like I'm all about this. This is actually a good thing. But even in the debate or the dialogue about that, I'm defending, and in my defense I'm still otherizing this experience. I'm painting it in a good light. I'm saying this is a good thing, but it's still different. And so like we yeah, we run the risk of doing our children a disservice by showing them how great this life can be, because we're still drawing the lines in between experiences, and we're otherizing our own experience. That's there's there there's a lot to process in there, and it sounds like you've done a lot of processing.
Well, I mean, my way into working with TCKs was not psychology, it was sociology.
Mm,
And I'm very grateful for that, in that it's identity in context. And so sociology, I think, was a massive saving grace for me in terms of
mhm,
understanding my TCK world, but also inviting that kind of domestic anthropology perspective of this. The only way that I can access my passport culture here with any kind of dignity
mhm,
is as an anthropologist, as
mm,
if this is
mhm,
another new place.
Mm.
yeah.
And the risk, I think, is that we talk about it as the baseline normal,
Mhm,
um, which just kills any interest.
yeah.
But if we can build interest in both parts, and which is
Mm.
hard for parents to do if they had reasons to leave. They aren't, that invested maybe, or they did find something limited, or that's true to their experience, but a child just soaks that up as
Yeah.
the experience. And yeah, it's not, it's trying to understand that there's a function to why we present some places as better than others, or more valuable than others, but it is just a story that we're telling about the place.
Mm,
And behind every story, why is this story being told? What's
yeah.
it
Mm.
doing for me? And if we can get to that, we can go, okay, is it still working? Or is it actually meaning that I'm intensely lonely, alienated, and think I'll never belong? Because that's not helping me anymore
Right.
nowadays.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else could I explore?
Wow.
Well, I love that you brought in story. I'm a big fan of story. Um, and it is, I think, being able to look at life and experiences as stories. It also invites the possibility to look at things from different perspectives. I think we're drawn to, and I think it's a big thing now to sort of tell the other side of things. I remember seeing Wicked, the play on the West End in London, and just thinking how clever, that it's basically, it builds on, a well-known The Wizard of Oz. We all know The Wizard of Oz. And this basically says, yeah, 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 but what if, like, we kept that story but looked at it from a completely different angle, and they built an entire, story that really is an aspect of another story. And I think we're drawn to that. And that I think story is a great tool for inspiring, curiosity. And so I think I love that you put it framework, because that's the thing. Uh, our own perspective on story is there for a reason. And I think it can be a very healthy thing to realize that one story might have quite a few, different perspectives. Um, I think I look at my own, my own story and TC Canis, and I'm a military brat. And so, for me, the whole idea of monocultural, even though we're not saying that anymore, or settled, um, it wasn't, I didn't have the language and framework to know that I was a TCK, as we've already said, till later, till I was in university, really. And, and realized that I had been trying, and not just me, but everyone I grew up with at all these military schools overseas, we'd been trying to shove uh, our experience into the language and framework of a settled experience. In fact, what got me into working with TCKs was a kind of it was a research kind of project, and we looked at how many military brats who spend most of their growing up time overseas, how many of them re-entered the military, and it was a huge amount. But the reasoning a lot of times was almost a cultural moratorium. And one respondent put it really well, and he said, well, I grew up knowing how to be a foreigner, and when I returned to the US, which is funny coming because he wasn't even born in the US, so returning meant going to live at a place that he had never really lived permanently. He'd visited the US, in the summers sometimes. They said, so when I returned to the US, I had no idea. I don't know how to be an American in America. I only know how to be foreign. So I joined the military because I need to go be foreign. And you can't do that in your own country. You have to do that elsewhere. And that piqued my interest. And to me, it harkens back to that curiosity thing, that there's a need for curiosity uh, beyond your own experience, whether your experience happens to be multiple cultural inputs, or whether your experience is a more consistent, settled set of inputs. That really curiosity is healthy all over the place, because if you're only seeing one aspect of your story, it is, like you said, it's very easy to get in a rut. It's very easy, if the story you've told, and I think we tell ourselves stories for good reason, and they probably work for a certain point in time, saying, well, I'm unique. That was probably a great story to help you explain why you had a hard time fitting in with people who didn't share your experience. That story had a purpose, it made sense. But if you keep with that story and don't look at other aspects, as you said, you run the risk of becoming, terminally alone. If you don't look at more sides of that story, that, it's valid, but so many more aspects. And that, I think that's something that we're going to continue to see. And times are obviously changing. I think Jerry and I have talked about this before. It's things change so rapidly now, so very rapidly. Um, what do you see, Rachel, as a current sort of struggle, or what is something that you see come up a lot right now for TCKs and adult TCKs? What's the forefront? I mean, we've been through a global pandemic. We've got AI. Communication has become fast. There's so many switches and changes, and I think even as I chart, you know, what I speak at schools say about for TCKs has changed quite a bit over the years. If I gave the TCK talk to students now that I did 10 years ago, a lot of it, would be less relevant. So there's some core concepts, but there is, as we change, things change, which is good. I have a short attention span, so I can't keep doing the same talk for that many years. So thank goodness for me. But with that, what do you think, what's going on now in the TCK world? What do you see needing to be addressed at the moment?
Hey, before you answer that, Rachel, I just want to get you, because I've been waiting to ask, because Chris just redefined it. How do you feel about more consistent, settled set of inputs as a replacement for monocultural? Can we use that? More consistent, settled set of inputs.
Do you know what I'm a fan of? I'm a fan of variety of terms. I think rather than having a kind of
No, we
correct
just need one.
word,
We just need
I
one.
enjoy disapproving of words and making people uncomfortable. But what makes me
Ooh,
really happy is people making up their own things. I mean, I
oh,
use
look,
settled. I
Ooh,
use
yeah,
more
yeah.
settled. I use settled people versus third culture kids. The versus is intrinsically problematic right there. But
See, I come from a
She's
much
just
more
taking the lexicon and shaking it.
exactly. I don't really want it to land anywhere specific. I just want it to
Just keep the balloon in the air.
I come
yeah,
from a much more
absolutely.
monotermist background. But yeah, I'm open to other things, I guess.
Well,
Sorry,
and
back to
think,
Chris's question. Go
well,
ahead,
I'm going to
Rachel.
segue them together if I may,
Ooh, we love a
because
good segue.
Oh,
yeah, I'm going to see if I can pull the threads, because what I think you're asking for there, Jerry, is a kind of, what I hear happening a lot for us is, what is the better version? What is the ideal form this language or this reality needs to take, or the narrative? You know, what are we aiming for as a kind of best practice version? And I think, in terms of, back to your point, Chris, what is changing, what I hear an awful lot of is the explosion of mental health wellness constructs and frameworks via TikTok, YouTube, all the places. I've run out because I'm old, but you know, this is where people are finding things, and I love it. It's such a leveler.
yeah.
But what I'm noticing happening is, there's this urge for a one story arrival point. What is a healthy relationship? What is a solid identity? What is stability? What is toxic? And when we've got these ideas floating around, we all want to get it right, and we all want to know what we should be aiming for. And I suppose, in terms of the TCK piece, I think that's really pertinent, because part of the instability of our lives is, we're often looking for the correct way to be in any given context. And so we're scanning a multiplicity of templates out there to find the way to do this identity right. And I see that showing up in relationship styles. I see that showing up in our expectations around career, around parenting, all the things. But there's this particular flavor or urgency around, what's the healthy way to be? And my instinct is to buck against that a bit, and go, what's healthy for you? If we reduce this down to its data points, what's actually happening? And how can we make sense of that? Because if we just look in terms of behaviors or output, we're just comparing against all these templates and kind of scanning through. Rather than, what's underneath it? What's the desire behind this? What's the story below? Which then leads to mess and a kind of conceptual anarchy, if you like. But it keeps us alive and listening. We've got to keep listening, so the stories can be grounded in what's actually happening, rather than the version we think they should arrive at. Does that work?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so very true, and I like that I like so much that you mentioned, but just bringing up the phenomenal access that we have now to systems, to nomenclature, to all sorts of things to do with well-being and mental health. And I agree. I think it's phenomenal. I think one of my own personal takes on it is, we as humans, I think we're bad at balance. I think you look at, and we
It's a
just
fair
pendulum
statement.
swing. So we did. So mental health and stuff was not talked about. It was stigmatized. It was, so a long time, very repressed. And we've overcome that. But I think we've overcome it and gone, woohoo, way too far in it. So that now, with access to all these terms, we're a bit roughshod with them. And so now, if you experience any amount of stress, you have anxiety. And so we almost throw out the terms too much. And I think, once again, you've explained that in a way that makes so much sense. It's looking at it as a single story. It's looking at it as saying,
It's the
well, yeah,
danger of the single story piece, isn't it?
exactly, that I will just, anytime I'm stressed, well, I must have anxiety. And so I express, I have social anxiety. And other people don't. They are valid stories, but that's such a good way, I think, to help try to draw us in balance, is to say, there's quite a few different perspectives, and that'll help you triangulate. The more angles you can look at, the more you can triangulate where something is, because it's probably just too broad to say you're anxious. It's probably just too broad to say, you're to say whatever, to say you're depressed. It's probably those are valid things. People are anxious. People do have depression, but even that, it's sort of a single point, looking at what's the
Absolutely.
cause of that. When does that come out? Uh,
Yeah.
what are the other, more specific terms for it? And so I think even with the phenomenal access to information we have, which is a great thing. I'm so glad stuff isn't stigmatized. Um, but almost with that, we need to inject sort of this idea, this view that we need multiple perspectives. Because you can't triangulate well with only one perspective. That's the way our vision works. We've got two eyes, so we can do distance, and you cover
Yeah.
up one, and you can't do distance very
Yeah.
well. You bump into tables,
Yeah.
and so I
Absolutely.
feel it's the same thing.
It's
Absolutely.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is good. And it's part of the mess, right? Like this is messy when you start unpacking anything, when you do, whether you're wherever your experience started, and then when you have the tools and the resources and kind of the maturity to look back on it and think about it, it is messy. And Chris, as you were talking, like I agree that pendulum swing is challenging, and I think the overuse of any terms, especially connected to mental health, this is triggering, this is traumatic, this is I don't feel safe. Like there's a lot of kind of large terms, and the overuse of them distracts from the reality of them. So when we use those terms when that's not actually the case, because we just don't have the right words, because those feel like this will get me there quicker, right? Then there are people who have experienced trauma and have been triggered and aren't safe, right? And we distract from them by overusing them, but that's part of the mess. As we figure this out, it's kind of like we overuse it, but at least those terms are out there now, and we're kind of navigating through what do we really mean by this? Well, like, how do we define trauma? What is it? It's not that your parents got upset with you, right? Or that you got grounded because you didn't wash the dishes. That was not actually traumatic, and to call that traumatic takes away something from somebody who has experienced real trauma. But even as we mumble through that and figure it out, we have those conversations, and finally we're paying attention to those issues and those real things that were generations before just kind of ignored, right? Rachel, you mentioned social media and how this is all getting attention on social media,
Yeah.
and at the same time, social media is driving depression and like it's adding to anxiety, and it's adding to mental health issues, and at the same time offering solutions that were never there before and we didn't have access. It reminds me of Homer Simpson, um, and kind of how he spoke about beer. He said, and he holds his glass up, he said, "Here's to beer, both the cause of and solution to all our problems." And I'm like, that's kind of brilliant, and it
And
fits for social media.
The
it
wisdom
fits
of
for the
Homer Simpson.
human, it fits for people. We are the cause and the solution of all of our experiences, be they
Yes.
miserable or ecstatic. And I think that there's so much hope in that for me, because if somebody's using the word trauma or trigger in a way that I don't relate to, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I can
Well,
just keep
exactly.
listening.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
can just keep asking questions. I don't need to correct them. I don't need to educate them, because they're trying to communicate. They're attempting to communicate something that matters, whether
Yes.
or not I agree with the terms. And the opportunity there to just lean in and go, what is happening for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
What is happening right now? And it's like any kind of language learning. We're all figuring it out, and we think we've found the word that is going to make the other person validate us and believe us. And if we can get beyond the words and go, I'm going to validate you anyway. You could be using the word jelly instead of trauma right now. That's fine. What is happening to make you feel jelly? It doesn't matter, because it's this relational wonder that we get to engage in,
Oof,
which is
that's
just
good.
exciting.
Relational wonder that we get to engage in. That's
Oh, see, there's
that's
that
the
curiosity
t-shirt
again.
for this
That's the
episode.
t-shirt.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's the t-shirt.
Yep.
I just want a t-shirt with jelly on it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your
What's
jelly?
causing you to feel jelly? There we go. Rachel has just done our merch for the episode. It's fantastic. Don't worry, you'll get a cut. You'll get a cut.
Mm.
It's fine. It's
Oh,
fine. Rachel, how incredibly fantastic to have you. I feel like, I mean, we could easily keep chatting for quite some time, but you know, we have to behave ourselves and keep podcasts to a certain amount. Um, but I think, and I know Jerry will agree. I think this warrants a sequel. I think we're just gonna
Oh, it
have to
really
have Jelly
does.
Part 2.
Yep.
I
Um,
like that jelly part too.
Yep.
Jelly Part 2. We'll have to
Oh, I'd
put
love
it
that.
put it on the horizon. And speaking of horizons,
Oh boy. Yeah.
if further education is on your horizon, I would be remiss if I didn't let you know that this episode is kindly sponsored by our dear friends at KC360.co, who are experts in helping you navigate the very complicated field of higher education. You know how I said that we go on swings and humans have a hard time with balance? My gosh, is that true? And trying to balance out your needs when it comes to the financial, academic, social, economic systems that are involved in reaching a higher education solution that's right for you, very complicated. So head on over to kc360.co and check out our friends there who have a ton of expertise, particularly when it comes to TCKs and helping them attain their higher education goals. I am so proud. Look at me.
That was good. I'm going
I
there
do
right now.
commercials
Yeah.
now. I
Yeah.
do commercials right now.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
That
proud of
had
myself.
flow, that had
Yep. It
feeling, that
comes
had all the
naturally.
things.
Yeah.
It comes naturally because I believe in the product. You know, I believe in the product. I really
Yep.
do.
Yep.
I do. I think we're gonna need a sequel. And Rachel, I can't thank you enough for coming to chat with us. Thank you for, I mean, you could be outside in your tent,
I
or at least
could,
ogling your tent. You could just
I
be ogling your
could,
tent right now.
I could
And
just be
instead,
gazing at it with
yeah, and
projected
instead you chatted with
anticipation.
us and
Rachel, how
our
can people get the book,
three
and
listeners.
how can they connect with you?
They can get the book on Amazon. They can type in the title, or they could type in my name, or they could head over to my website, where there will be links to all those things, exploreyourstory.com.
Love that.
Yeah, basically there, really.
Great.
Oh,
And
I
we
should
will.
say that on Friday this week, so I don't know when this is coming out, but very soon I'm wrapping up the audiobook of the book. And
Yes.
hopefully
I was
that will
going to
be
ask,
an
is there
option.
audio? Yes. I
Yeah,
love
there
audiobooks.
should be soon. If I can figure out the tech and just get my head around that, then there will be audio, which I'm really excited about.
I'm so
'Cause there's-
excited. And are you reading it yourself?
I am reading it myself, and I love
Perfect.
reading out loud. And
Oh,
my favorite writing is you know, when I wrote a blog that made me cry, I felt like I was there, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I that kind of connection with feeling and the universality of experience is just marvelous. And so being able to
Outstanding.
read it myself has been brilliant, which means I am mispronouncing everything,
all right.
obviously, and it's
Makes it better.
woefully inconsistent. And my editors had to like edit out all the tummy grumbles. It's I'm not the best in the
Man,
booth.
that's
Um,
authentic. That's
Yeah.
It's
people respect that.
authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hopefully that'll be there. And you know, neurodivergency is a big piece in the
Nice.
TCK world, and of course, so many of us do better taking things in audibly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
I'm a
I'm really
Oh.
excited.
big audiobook lover, and always appreciate it being read by the author. I can't get it out of my head if it's a different voice.
Right.
Even if I didn't know the author or the speaker beforehand, if I find out that it's not the author, it just doesn't feel
Feel
right.
betrayed.
So I think it's great, and I think you've got a great voice. I could listen to you
Thank you.
read this book. So so if you're listening, check on the audiobook. It may be out, or
It could be
coming
out depending
soon.
on, you know, how quickly we get this episode out. So
Regardless, get the book, get 10 copies, and give them to your friends.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
they will thank you. They will thank you. Speaking of which, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. Jerry, as always,
I
nothing
have to
short
be
of a
here,
delight.
but
You
this
have to be
is
here.
good.
You
Yeah.
are. I hold you
Yeah.
to it. Contractually bound. Contractually bound. And dear listeners who aren't contractually bound, but you know, to all of our 3 listeners, thank you for joining us despite not being on contract.
You know who
We
you
do
are.
appreciate it. You know who you are, and you know we love you. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Okay. Okay, bye.
Bye.